Hopefulness 2.0, April 17th. I'm now officially out of chicken because I've just been kind of like taking pieces of it and snacking on it. Come on. There we go. So I already got some oil in the pan. I'm gonna make some fried rice. Not a, an amazing kind of fried rice or anything, but throw in some eggs. Rice, of course, some seasonings, and be done with it. Trying to use up what I've got right now before I go buy anything. I'm also thinking of doing some cinnamon rolls, since I have still an entire pound of confectioner sugar, and I'm almost done with the I'm almost done with the frosting that I had that are made for the carrot cake. I put the carrots in the freezer so that they'll last a little longer. Yeah. So I did the, I think I'm going to get some of coconut oil too. I did the stream yesterday. Did it for 30 minutes. It took about 2-ish hours just to get set up. Just because I haven't used OBS in a long time, and it's a little bit more streamlined, but at the same time there's some issues that I'm having with it, because when I went back and I listened to the stream, it just sounded like garbage. My audio was just terrible, and I heard my audio from my computer. It doesn't sound that bad, so I don't know if in the process I used the wrong, because there's only supposed to be one microphone I'm aware of, but I don't know. We'll see. I'll have to figure that out later. Because it looks like there's 4 total, at least what looks to be audio options that are available. One of which was actual audio. I was using that more or less kind of like an interstitial music type situation, just to kind of hey, show's about to start, type thing. So I got a stupid ass booger that has been bugging the shit out of me for the last 10 minutes. Alright, smells like my oil is pretty much heated up. Woo. Ah, shit. Oh, he got me in the eye. That sucks. Oh well, such is life. Go on. A little bit more oil. This is just, anybody who may be watching this, which nobody watches this, but anybody who might be watching it, who has done, stir fry or whatever, they're probably just screaming at the screen right now. I'm I don't care. It's the point. Point is, relatively quick and easy. I don't have a wok. Woks are very useful, very handy, but at the same time, they're kind of a pain in the ass too, because of how big they are. And heaping a half teaspoon of salt should go quite far. I don't have any soy sauce. I don't have any fish sauce. I do have some rice wine. I could maybe use that. I don't know. I'm just basically cooking it the way that I would generally, or rice vinegar rather, not rice wine, so I won't use too much. There we go. Alright, and let's start mixing again. I mean, it's going to taste good either way, so it doesn't matter. I mean, I threw in a decent amount of salt and pepper. It's refried rice and, fried eggs. That's nothing wrong. Oh, sure, it's not done in the right order. It doesn't have the right method. So just a little bit of this coconut oil just for some fun. I said a little bit, that's quite a bit, but whatever. Use the bowl that I used yesterday when I reheated stuff. Because why not? Alright. It doesn't have like big old egg chunks and stuff in it like usually you'll get, like a shrimp fried rice or something like that, but I don't care. Sure, the homogeneity can sometimes help with the flavor. Homogeneity can, or rather heterogeneity, can help be a flavor enhancer of some kind. The various texture differences and the like. I mean, that's why, you put in things like salt and pepper. Because they're both two different types of seasonings that then aid in flavor. And I was like, all right, well, it's, does it look pretty? Not really. That's not the point, though. With that heterogeneity, it would look a little bit more attractive. Hopefully, I cooked the rice enough. I did have it up on high for quite a bit. I'm going to let it kind of sit for a bit. Just kind of warm and moderate itself. Just nice and steam coming off of it. But, yeah, so I ended up on stream for about 30 minutes. There's one person who ended up in the stream. They wanted to see feet at first. I was like, no, not going to see my feet, sorry. But then, the conversation actually started going in a different direction. It was interesting because, I was like, well, I'm not really into I don't really understand the whole foot fetish kink. And they were like, it's not really like a fetish, it's more of a comfort thing. And so we started talking a little bit more about that. Sort of the nature of the show. And, it's like they found that they just kind of find male feet comforting, and apparently it had something to do with their childhood, which is usually where, comforts come from. Apparently, like their uncle used to, sit there and watch TV with them, and, their uncle's feet was, were always pointing towards them. So I'm like, makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Check my eye real quick. Be alright to bake. I don't know, we'll see. was online yesterday, and somebody was talking about, it was actually a video, this young blind girl, she's like 16, I think, and she was showing the features on like an iPhone, and I hadn't even thought of it, but somebody else had mentioned that, like, so you usually have like a black screen feature, because I mean, it seems kind of pointless, and I was like, I never even thought of that, but duh, that makes sense, because I mean, she can't see it, unless she can kind of see, but based on like the way that her body was, because something that I hadn't realized until literally earlier, like at the beginning of this video, was like, why certain blind people, especially people who seem to have been born blind, have a certain kind of physical presence that almost seems frail. And I mean, you know, obviously there's some certain obviousness to it, but like part of it is they don't have a visual cue for how to sit or stand to emulate. So like, if you don't see somebody with good posture, you probably won't have good posture if you can't see at all. And you know, when a person is already disabled through vision, you're probably not going to give them too much shit for it either. Because, you know, the last thing you want to do is, you know, make a person who has a massive disability like being blind feel worse, you know, in some way or another. But yeah, it's interesting, to say the very least, you know, like just so many of the things that I don't really think of until like I may have had that, and there's a kind of internal revulsion to it. And you know, I'm not saying this is to be cruel or anything of that nature. It's just, that's a part of human behavior that is there's a survival mechanism when it comes to the types of revulsion that we have. Now, I don't know them all. I can't explain every single detail about who we are as people and why we do the things that we do. But like certain smells, for instance, we steer clear of them because they are associated with death. And we steer clear of death because there's a survival mechanism associated with that. What exactly that is, I don't know. There are definitely, you know, bacteria, potential viruses, etc., that surround dead bodies that could cause us harm. And so being around a dead and decaying body and rotting generally means you don't want to be near it, and those who were revolted by it, who had a sense of revulsion to be around those things and then thus left, were more likely to survive, because then they wouldn't be affected by whatever potential pathogens there may be in, you know, dead and rotting flesh. And certain physiological certain exhibitions of physiology, frailness and the like, at least in my brain and my understanding and my logic, it kind of makes sense they would be associated with older age and thus potential for death too. And when a young girl who is like 16, 17 years old is showing these physiological frailties because they haven't seen what good posture looks like and how to hold your head and so many other things, I can make the connection. It makes sense. It's like, hey, you and I'm not saying, you know, this is a terrible person and that we shouldn't be near them or anything. It's that there is an underlying instinctual drive to, it's not conscious, it's not a decision, it is a sensation, it is a feeling, because we have evolved it and it has made us thrive. One could say, well, that sounds like you're being cruel to a 16-year-old. I'm not. Also throwing in the pepper kind of discolors it, makes it a little bit more gray. Good. It's not like, oh yeah. Probably could have used a little bit less oil. But I didn't want it too dry. I don't think the coconut oil was really an addition, though, to be honest. It probably would have just been good with just the neutral oil. But whatever. And so trying to understand these things. And this is one of the things that I find fascinating and difficult. Just as a person. What I'm going to do here, though, is throw in a little bit of my garlic powder. Which isn't really garlic powder, it's a combination. It's a seasoning blend. It has garlic, parsley, paprika, it's not the same as having, big old chunks of chicken in it, so. And again, because did it for simplicity. That's why I cracked the eggs in there and let them fry up a little bit, and then broke the yolks, and then threw in the rice. Better. Garlic powder does a lot. And so it's not so much like me trying to justify some sort of negative reaction towards a person. It's trying to understand that negative reaction towards a person so that in the future, I know how to potentially combat it. It's like growing up in a racist household, racist, homophobic, etc. With an extended family who then was also the same. My whole family's white. Like, the last time I talked to one of my uncles, he flipped open a pocket knife, pointed it at me. He didn't go like, right in, but he was like, he flipped it open, and he kind of pointed the blade in my direction like this. I'll even try to emulate it with my pocket knife. So, flips it open, and he looks, and he points it at me and he says, if you ever bring a black girl around here, I'm gonna fucking stab you. That's the kind of shit I grew up with. Now, his behavior was much more extreme than my other family. But for all intents and purposes, he was saying what a lot of others were thinking. I mean, hell, even at one point, I was at college, and I was hanging out with about 3 or 4 people, 2 of which were black girls. And I don't remember exactly what the question was, but it had something to do with me and, potentially dating a black girl, something like that. And I said, when I'm dating, I'm racist or something like that. Something along those lines. And I don't know how that impacted the conversations or the relationships or anything along those lines after the fact. I'm sure it had a negative impact, of course. But I said it so matter-of-factly because I'm like, this is how it is. That's why, looking back on it, and then trying to be in their shoes, it's like, this dude is totally okay with completely dismissing somebody just because of the color of their skin that they had no choice over. And I mean, I'm still, like, I still struggle with it. Like, you know, I've seen black women in porn, or, you know, models, etc., or, you know, amateur girls who'd be taking off their shirts and stuff and doing whatever. And I still lean towards white girls. And while it is not nearly as bad as it was, I still find myself questioning myself throughout it. And I'm just like, why though? And I don't know yet. I don't know yet. I mean, you could say that it's because of the way you grew up, and it is something that you're trying to work on, and as such, at the very least, since you're trying to work on it, you know, kudos, I guess. That's me being really roundabout, trying to make myself feel better about it, I guess. I don't know. But I know what the issue is with this rice. I didn't cook the rice enough, so it's still kind of on the mushier side instead of it being fried and crispy. Which is generally why you, like, when you're doing, it's like, I've made good fried rice. I've made really good fried rice. And if you let the rice crisp up, it definitely tastes better. But, anyway. You know, so I'm still working on these things. Obviously, having said that, you know, I grew up in that kind of environment. I mean, one of my cousins, he was gay, and it was just like family secret. Anytime it was ever spoken of, it was only ever spoken of within the family, and only the adults, and it was always effectively in whispered tones. It was as if, and I don't actually know the intent. I'm only surmising, I'm only assuming. But it was if these conversations were to try to validate, or not even that, to determine if it was acceptable or not. Which now at the age of 40, with the way that the world is, and unfortunately with a lot of the backwards bullshit we're dealing with right now, but anyway. It's fucked up to me. It is. Like, I wasn't even comfortable with it when I was younger, but being the younger person who had no semblance of voice or authority in this kind of, white suburbia, there was that. There was also a level of discomfort with that too, because I had discomfort with what they were talking about, but it was also uncomfortable because challenging any kind of position of authority was grounds for getting your ass beat. Basically, there's always that hovering threat in some capacity or another, even if it wasn't truly a real threat. There was enough of a threat through, if you will, the social contract of the families. And I'm almost thinking, man, it sounded like the mob or something. It wasn't. It was like, these are your everyday fucking white folk that, go about doing their everyday thing, but when someone's gay, it throws a wrench into shit. Because and this was I want to say early mid-90s, when, because I mean, he was only like 7 years older than me. Still is, as far as I can tell, because I follow. We're connected on LinkedIn. But and there was also the element of he was an inspiration for me being attempting art, because I saw what he did and I liked him as a person. And then this is the insidiousness, if you will, even if it's subconscious. The way that you talk about somebody will definitely change how that person is seen in the eyes of somebody who likes them. So he was always somebody I liked. As I grew older, as I heard more and more about him with these hushed tones, I started to become wary. And that sucks. And I started to like him less and less, even though he was still him. Because family is the biggest programmer in so many ways. Nature versus nurture. Nurture tends to win out a lot of ways. Not all of them, of course. But, I mean, when one nurture is essentially overshadowed by another nurture. And, this is the roundabout way of saying, this is why, in so many ways, we have a lot of our hang-ups that we have is because of the way we grew up. The way that we grew up, in many ways, concreted the way that we think, the way that we feel. And a lot of people don't like the discomfort, and they don't like to approach the discomfort. And I understand that, but because of that, people will fight really hard for their comfort. And do things that can be harmful to others in the process. Especially the people that didn't do anything to them. I've been hearing about this so-called, lack of testosterone, something or other, fucking segment that fuckhead Carlson is doing or whatever, and it supposedly looks pretty homoerotic too, which is kind of ironic, but it's like, it's shit like that. And then you have people with the whole groomer thing, like that talking point. I mean, and it's working. It's like people were talking about how just being gay is somehow grooming children, and then there's this Twitter thread that, I mean, it's probably pretty likely, but he's talking about having been on a train, and it's this gay couple, and like this dude just comes up and starts yelling at the kids, saying that their parents are stealing them, that they're grooming them, and just freaking the fucking kids out. And apparently this diatribe goes on for a while before any, authority figures are involved. And then the kids, even after he's gone and he's off the fucking train, the kids are, still freaking out over this shit. And it's like, it's 2022, goddammit. Stop this shit. And it's like, going back to the blind girl, you know, the technology she was showing was fucking fascinating. I never knew that iPhones were able to do what she was doing. And it like, I didn't even understand half of it at one point. Like, obviously she's, you know, scrolling her finger over it, and it's like, she's not even tapping it. She's just kind of pushing her finger on it, and it's like, oh, hey, Twitter, and then Instagram, blah, blah, blah. And like, she's got it on a high speed fucking voice shit. So it's like, I can barely understand half of what's being said from the phone, and then she's, you know, explaining it. So I'm trying to like parse those pieces of information. And then she gets on to like the Braille, and I'm like, what the fuck? How is this Braille? And it took my brain like literally a half hour later or something. And it's like 4, 5, 6. I didn't realize, but that's what, you know, there's like specific pieces of data. So like Braille is a 2x3, and it's dots, and as far as I can recall, everything is 4 or 5 or 6 dots, just the way that they're arranged. Apparently, you can get all 26 letters, and you can get commas and shit. I don't know. I mean, she was just typing the shit, and like, she's looking away because, I mean, she didn't need to see it. And she's just showing the camera, and she's just typing like a motherfucking beast, and, you know, she this whole sentence out, and I'm like, the fuck? That's phenomenal. I'm like, this is like magic. And then it's like, but the problem, and the reason I brought it all up was, despite that, I'm getting tingles just thinking about it. There was that underlying discomfort. And I'm like, you want your discomfort to be there because it's a survival mechanism. A certain level of it anyway. But at the same time, there's certain elements of discomfort that don't need to be there. So you can't completely destroy it. Because again, it's a survival mechanism. But at the same time, it's like, to what end? You know? That's why I find humans fascinating. Make it sound like I'm a fucking alien or something. But it is what it is, I suppose. I don't even have a point. Normally I try to make a point of it all, but I don't. I guess, you know, just try to understand. Oh, and a couple more pieces of information from what happened yesterday. Buddy of mine hits me up and he's like, hey, boss man hasn't responded because he's been busy. I misread it in that he hadn't gotten my email. Obviously, I did not word them the same exact way that he worded it, but I misread his text, and it made it sound like he never got the messages in the first place. But I then reread it, and he's like, oh, he just hasn't checked it or whatever. And so he had me call up the place and leave my name and info with the guy who was there at the time, who apparently also lives in the same place as the boss man too. So we'll see how that goes. Probably contact me tomorrow. I'm not gonna be cooking. Like I said, I wanted to cook them some cinnamon rolls. That's just gonna be the next step, but I'm not gonna do that just yet. I was screwing around after my stream, and then we had another earthquake in a request. So I was like, I've done everything I'm gonna do today. I might as well. And we were doing well for a bit, And then our very last kill, the very last dragon, was just giving us a lot of hard. I think it was just because it was late, Easter weekend, so the numbers weren't exactly high. And then the way that we work on the there's a dragon in one room, and then there's like all these like smaller dragons. Some are stationary, some will path around, and one strategy to be competitive is to pull all the extra stuff away and then kill the main dragon. And hopefully kill the dragon before all the other stuff comes back. And in order to prevent the other stuff from coming back, you've got to make sure that you can piss off the other stuff enough so that they will continue to stay away long enough. And if somebody dies, you have like a backup slash a backup. So that you can kind of keep it as, you can try your best at least to keep it as, keep the, as they call training away, as persistent as possible. But for whatever reason, we kept having issues where some of the trains would come back. And then that would cause those critters to beat the living shit out of everybody else. And so we would wipe, which means clear the board. In that people would either be dead or they would have to get the hell out. I never died in any of that, which is good. Makes life a lot easier when you don't die. Maybe I could title that just because it's stupid out of context. Makes life a lot easier when you don't die. So we failed twice in a row. And then another guild, one of the big guilds that is often a problem in some capacity, they're so hardcore that they don't give a shit about anybody else, and so they will often either break or skirt rules so hard that it's like they often don't get in trouble. They're that guy at work that constantly fucks up, yet somehow doesn't get fired. Well, then they ended up screwing us over while we were in recovery during their attempt, killing off a bunch of people on our end. And in doing so, per the rules, they have to concede. They can't attempt it anymore for a specific period of time. I don't know, I think it's like 3 or 4 hours, something like that. And then we tried it again. But this time, instead of just training out, we were just like, all right, we're going to clear shit. We're just going to since we're not worrying about competitiveness, we're just going to clear out all the extra stuff. And then fight the big boss dragon. And then we were doing well, and then part of one of the pulls happened, and kind of had a semi-wipe, so we had to do that again. And then we finally beat the big dragon. And it took us 3 hours. So yeah, because we started real strong. The earthquake happened at around 8:30 p.m. And then we killed the dragon. We switched, we killed another dragon. And then nearby was another bigger dragon, one of the biggest. Killed those, no problem. Oops, still got a little bit more in there. It's the thing about weather change. Especially when in a dry place like LA. For me, at least. It gets all dry up there. And then, temperature fluctuations and the like. Anyway. So we killed Dragon 1, Dragon 2, Dragon 3, Dragon 4, all pretty much flawless. Dragon 5 took us 3 hours. First 4 dragons took us about 45 minutes, which is fucking insane. So yeah. Because the dragon, the last one we killed, died at 3 minutes past midnight. Actually, we may have been faster on those first 2 dragons because the earthquake happened at about 8:38 p.m. So but we had fun, and I won a giant, a very large coin purse, which reduces the weight of your gold coins, which is really handy. So yeah, that's the thing that happened. And then I fucked around for a little bit more, and brushed my teeth and went to bed. And then I just farted. Have fun.